Hi everyone. So we are gathered here together, the people from Room2Think, and we want to get curious about why we focus on listening. So listening is a focus of what we do at Room2Think. And the interesting question is, why have we chosen to focus on that as our way of supporting people, as opposed to any other intervention or other way of being in the way we work with people? So from my perspective, I think listening is something we underrate a lot. I don't know, I think we've had conversations about this, haven't we? Where we often are so busy waiting to hear the other people stop so we can start speaking our own mind that we actually don't pause to hear what's being said.
I think for me, there's something so exquisite about being listened to where you know you're not going to be interrupted, which is, to your point, Thor, so that you can actually learn what your own thoughts are. Because so often you're suppressed in your thinking, whereas when you're really listened to with a kind of an open heart, you can learn what's going on in your own mind, and that in itself can you can find your own way forward. So I think that's probably my sort of key to listening. And sorry, just to say another thing, there's been a lot of media coverage about it's good to talk, and yes, it is, providing you've got somebody who can listen. And so I think, again, there's not so much emphasis on the listening part of it, which is an incredibly important part of that process.
And I think a lot of people,
when we started talking, that, you know, the thing that brought us together is because we've got quite different backgrounds, we work in quite different ways, then actually the space we all shared was that for a day job, we all listen.
Yeah. Angie, I think you were going to come in.
You want to say something?
I was just going to say that I think a lot of people would be quite shocked if they realised just how little real listening goes on in their day-to-day lives. I mean, we're all having conversations all the time. We're all talking and we all think we're listening. But in actual fact, I think very few of us are really listening and hearing what the other person has to say.
And I think a real testament to that is the feeling that you have inside yourself, where you might feel frustration or anger at that sense that I'm not being heard or I'm not being seen by this other person. It doesn't have to be this big thing of being shouted down or talked over or anything like that, but an actual feeling in your chest or your heart or your stomach or your head or whatever of, I don't feel heard, I don't feel seen, I don't feel understood. And so when you find yourself in that really unique space, which I think is what we're creating in Room2Think, people begin to feel that sense of relaxation and relief of, oh, somebody actually understands me, someone sees me, someone hears what I have to say. And that is incredibly powerful.
That's lovely.
Yeah, it is sometimes referred to as a superpower, and what strikes me is that it's never taught, and yet it makes such a difference to somebody's life. So what we love about what we do is that we listen to learn, and as most of the time we find ourselves stuck in listening to fix or listening to win or listening to respond, and it's so hard just to sit back and listen to learn. When you do that, it helps that person to feel heard and listened to, and as David said, it just gives them that space. It's such an amazing way to have a conversation where one person can feel totally and fully supported in everything they want to say about anything, and not worry about being interrupted or corrected or judged, or have someone go, yeah, but you know what you need to do is this. It's totally free of all of those sorts of things that get in the way of helping someone to express what's really bothering them.
And I think what's magical, what can happen in that really, really magical space is when you as the listener say something like, so what you're saying is ... and then the person on the other side goes, yes, 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 that's exactly it. So sometimes they can't even express, even they can't find the words. And so when you as a listener can say that for them, again, it opens this door to something totally new for them. Those aha moments that are just so wonderful to experience, either for yourself or to witness somebody else experiencing them.
I think there's another dimension that's really relevant at the moment, where we have many opinions, many biases, many assumptions in so many different fields, but we just, you know, whether we look political or the landscape, but just so many different places. And I see so rarely are there conversations going on where there's that level of listening where you're really seeking to understand and learn, as you say. And if we could do that more and find that core sense of where something comes from in an individual, I believe that we would all benefit from that in terms of our understanding, you know, at a societal level, you know, not just in the individual conversations that we might have.
My sense is that in our conversations with people, is that we're not the only ones doing the listening. So as people's thinking partners, and they're telling us what's going on for them and we're listening to them, it's not just us that's listening, it's also them. Because it really feels like, you know, when we have thoughts and they just go around in our head, we obviously we hear what we're thinking, but we hear it inside of our head. Whereas something, when we use our voice box to actually speak it out to another person, it kind of travels back in through our ears, and there's a different part of our brain that can just go, ah. And it's almost like we hear it slightly differently than when we hear it from the inside of our head. And I think that is also a listening space we don't often recognize or value.
Yeah.
I think so many times we hear people say, oh, just being able to say all that out loud just made me understand it differently, just gave me a different perspective on it. And even just giving somebody that is very powerful.
And also being able to say it out loud in a space that is non-judgmental, and there's no prejudice or expectations from the person who's listening. There's a real sense of kind of almost like a butterfly in a way, kind of coming out of a cocoon, is that there's something real here that's been said. Whereas when it just sits in your head, there's almost something unreal about it. Because you've not shared it, because you've not said it, because you've not connected head to voice, the outside world. And again, that's also something very, very powerful, very magical about that.
Well, and it's always counterintuitive, because when people are talking to us, sometimes we feel that what they want us to do is respond. Whereas a lot of the time, that's not the conversation they want to have. They want to be heard, not fixed or responded to. And for those of us that have children, sometimes they don't want us to fix anything. They don't want an answer. They want to know that we are there for them and listening to them. So actually, you don't need to say anything. You just need to know. They just need to know that you're listening to them and engaged with them. And that's I find that sometimes quite hard with people. The natural instinct is to go, yeah, but actually, do you find that as well sometimes?
Yeah,
It's just,
definitely.
Yeah.
And managers, particularly, that I work with quite a lot, as a role, if you like, somebody in a management role, what are they there to do? They're there to fix and to solve problems and to direct and, you know, to tell people what to do. And suddenly you're saying, just listen. And that takes on a whole different, almost like a different philosophy of how you view people. Because if you're really listening in that way, you're viewing somebody as actually they've probably got their own answers, they've probably got their own ideas, they've probably got their own thoughts. Yeah. Instead of you telling them what they should think, it's quite a shift, actually.
So then you become part of the process that helps them find the solutions they have within them.
Absolutely.
and not block it with your own ideas about what they should do, or this is how you do it, or whatever. Sometimes people come with looking for specific guidance, but in the space that we're talking about, that they want to be listened to find their own truths and their own solutions, not given good advice.
And that's really interesting, because I quite often find, sorry, David, just to finish that one, but I quite often find some of the quite senior people that I work with have that view that well, I know it, I've been here before. And that's not really the point, because even though they might end up at the same solution, the process of getting there is likely to create more engagement and more trust and more growth. Sorry, David, I jumped in.
No. I think you make a really good point. And the point that came to me while you were talking was this notion of listening, helping resilience. So I think, we came together in response to the COVID-19 situation, and we recognized, because of our particular skill sets, that there would be a need for people to have space to speak out their experience, what they're holding, that perhaps they didn't feel that they could speak out in any other environment because they held the position of responsibility as a parent, or they had elderly parents that they were looking after, or they were managers, or they were leaders, or whatever the situation that they found themselves in. And so what that does over time, I think, is it corrodes our resilience if we're feeling overwhelmed by things and not being able to speak that out. So the space that we've created has really given people an opportunity just to kind of let some of that pressure off. And then suddenly just people feel so much more resourced. And they're kind of quite surprised that just talking or just listening has given them this wonderful gift of, okay, actually I feel stronger in myself. I can deal with this, whereas 20 minutes earlier I couldn't deal with this because I just felt overwhelmed by the whole thing.
Nicely put.
Whereas in actual fact, nothing's really changed in their lives in those 20 minutes. Just the fact that they've been able to get their thoughts out and be heard.
Yeah.
So the perspective has changed. Your reaction and response to something can be different as a result of changing how you perceive it. Like you say, just that download, emptying the sort of brain from the clutter to find a route through can be incredible.
I think also that's why I like us referring to ourselves as thinking partners. We're not solution people, or we're not whatever. We see ourselves as thinking partners, because we're almost like partnering the other person to help them think through. And it's like, I find that often if I need to think through stuff, I often find that my brain works better when I'm hooked up to another brain, or and particularly if I've got a whiteboard, with lots of different colored pens. There's just, I'm able to think thoughts that I'm not able to think in the vacuum of my own mind.
Yeah, and there's something co-creative about that as well, isn't there? So that's the beauty of it, is that as well as being a thinking partner, we're kind of also a co-creating partner, in that we are kind of creating that cauldron of stuff where we can pour stuff in and create something that's going to be, again, I keep using the word today, I keep using the word magical, but it does feels like that. It's transformative, and it's exciting.
Oh, that's lovely, David.
Sorry, Dennis. Yeah,
that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure. So I'm a little bit just conscious of time, and what we wanted to be able to share today was some of our thoughts around the power of listening. And people use the expression just listening, but for me, there's a real power in listening. And it's not a small thing, it's a really big thing. And it's a skill that's very little used. But one of the things that we've spoken to before is the fact that we're noticing that because we're role modeling the skill of listening, that the people that we're listening to are beginning to pick up those skills without us ever having to actually teach them how to do it, they're doing it for themselves now. And that's having a huge impact on the people that they know and love and care about. So not just listening, listening.